Hi, and welcome to Jana Cuddles. This is probably my first serious video that I've made on this channel, and I just wanted to do a little informal review of Detransition Baby, which I finished reading just a couple days ago. I was listening to the audiobook and reading along at the same time throughout most of it, and I highly recommend it. It really resonated with me because it's a book about trans women, sapphic trans women. They're like, I think they're all bi. It's written by a trans woman. I'm a trans woman. I'm dating a trans woman. So, you know, lots of parallels with my life. Through the detransition of one of the characters, it really explores what even is gender identity and what does it mean to you. Because, you know, some trans people feel very binary. I feel very binary. I'm just a woman born in the wrong body. I very much go along with that train of thought, but not all trans people do. There's a lot of in between or nowheres. Not everybody falls within that binary, and I think that was a really good way of getting people to think about it. It's written by a trans woman. It's about two trans women, but the third main character is a cis woman, so it's not necessarily for trans people. It's definitely a trans story, but much like Pose, anyone can enjoy it. I'm going to start with my complaints. They're all mild. So first of all, Tori Peters uses the term transsexual instead of transgender throughout the book. I understand that some trans people prefer that term, but it's also kind of uncomfortable for some of us. Is kind of my understanding that, transgender is typically used by people who transition but don't necessarily get the surgery, but transsexual is explicitly for people who've had surgery. I don't know. There's no hard and fast rules really. That's just what my understanding was, but neither of the trans women in this book have had surgery, and so I think it's just preference. So obviously Tori Peters prefers transsexual over transgender, and she does go in a little bit of detail at some point in the book talking about transgender was a catch-all term for the people who got AIDS or HIV in the 80s or 90s. They couldn't put them in a category as just men or women or gay men or lesbians. It was their other. And, I can get why you would want to distance yourself from that. But, me personally, I just don't like the term transsexual because I don't like throwing sex in the middle of that because, I feel like a lot of cis people, especially evangelical Christians and stuff, think that the LGBT community is all about sex and not really. I personally would want to distance myself from the term transsexual. It seems a little bit outdated to me. And even if I did get surgery, I don't think I would switch over to using that term. I think I would just continue saying transgender because I think that transgender is a better representation of the community because there's a difference between sex and gender. You can't change your sex really, but you can change your gender, and I think transgender encapsulates that a little bit better, but personal preference, that's my preference, so it's not really a big deal. I guess my only concern is that I don't want cis people to just start calling us transsexuals because they read this book, and it's I don't know, it's a little bit of a gray area for me, I guess, but very minor. It's just a term. The story was great. Going into it, I was very skeptical because it has detransition on the title. That's kind of a big thing going on of giving trans people rights because one out of, I don't even know, detransition. Going into it, I didn't want that kind of story to gain traction amongst cis people, but the way that she did it, I think, really worked because, again, spoilers, the character who detransitioned is kind of grappling with their gender identity the entire book. And at the very end refers to themselves as a woman again. But, you know, earlier in the book, they describe themselves as not a man, like definitely not a man, but not necessarily a woman. So they might not identify as a binary trans woman, but, you know, by the end of the story, they definitely fell on that side of the spectrum, which is already a little bit of dated term. My last little tiny pet peeve in the book was just that RuPaul was mentioned and not instantly he is transphobic. It was just kind of like passive. It was like, oh yeah, RuPaul exists and that's more for people of color. And that is the only reason I was okay with it, because yes, it's mainly aimed at people of color and maybe white people shouldn't talk about it, so I guess maybe I shouldn't throw my voice into there. But I do think he has caused some harm towards the trans community in the past. So, you know, me personally, I'm just a little bit against him, but whatever. I have lots of friends who enjoy his show, and I'm not gonna like unfriend them on Facebook or something because they watch the show. It's like I don't care. They've all proven to me that they support trans people. So that's all I really ask. On the point of it being called Detransition Baby and having detransition on the cover, it made me very nervous, as I mentioned. Now I'm like a little bit excited about that because I really want specifically TERFs to be excited and read this book, not knowing that the author is trans, because she doesn't really look trans, you know, whatever that means, but, you know, she's cis-passing. So I kind of hope that some, you know, TERFy people will go into this book expecting it to be on their side and to be like, hey, this is why people detransition and it's really toxic or whatever. And the truth is, in the book, it's just that gender is complicated. Gender identity is complicated, and modern society makes it really, really difficult to navigate because it doesn't make us feel safe to really explore that. So I think that this book, if even one TERF reads it, maybe it'll be a decent rebuttal towards them, towards their arguments or whatever. Not that I'm thrilled about there being arguments about me existing or whatever, but, you know, that's the world we live in. And then, finally, one of the main reasons that I really related to this book is because I really, really relate to Reese's character. Reese is the binary trans woman in the book, and she desperately, desperately wants to be a mother. She wants to have a child, and that's something that I myself, as a binary trans woman who cannot biologically get pregnant, desperately wish for. And it's something that trans women like us have to just come to terms with at some point. But, you know, reading the book brought up a lot of emotions around that, you know, some negative, some positive. It really allowed me to reflect on that, and I would highly, highly recommend this book to any cis person who wants to have a better understanding of what it's like to be a trans woman. Unfortunately, it does kind of only specifically talk about the trans femme experience rather than the trans masculine. So, and I obviously can't really speak to that, but you know, if you're looking for a trans masculine experience, don't go into this book. Read this book for the trans femme experience. But I think that this book would give you a very good understanding of just what it's like day to day to live as a trans woman in America, specifically white trans women, which is mentioned in the book as well. So there is that. It's specific to white trans women. So we are privileged in some ways, but we're not in others. So if you want to just have a little bit more understanding, I would definitely recommend it. That's it. I said it was an informal review. This has been Jana Cuddles. Like and subscribe. Maybe I'll get back on my bullshit tomorrow.